when I've tried resting a hot pizza on my plastic cutting boards, the crust tends to take on the flavor of the dishwasher, which is gross.
After seeing Joshua Weissman's pizza video, a lot of you guys requested that I review Adam Ragusa's, and today we're going to do just that. My name is James Makinson. I have been cooking as a chef for many years, and I have plenty of other recipes on my YouTube channel as well. And if you do guys like this video, then be sure to share, like, and subscribe, and let's get started.
For 10 years, I've been trying to make real New York-style pizza at home, and I think that I've gotten as close as I'm ever gonna get.
10 years! Adam's been trying to perfect this recipe.
Start with a teaspoon of yeast, a teaspoon of sugar, and a quarter cup of warm water, and wait 5 minutes. I have heard that blooming the yeast like this is not really necessary, but I like to do it just to make sure that my yeast is still alive before I spend 2 days waiting for a dough to rise that never will.
It is a good idea to test the yeast. It is, because it's not like you're in an industrial kitchen and you're using a lot of it. It can die on you, and you need to check to make sure that it is alive. Now, if you don't have dry yeast or instant yeast and you're using fresh yeast, you're going to have to make adjustments to this recipe.
Then put in 2 more cups of warm water, a tablespoon more sugar, and a tablespoon of salt, and then a glug of olive oil. That's like a quarter cup at most. Then bread flour, high protein flour, 5 cups to start with, and then knead in the mixer with the dough hook attachment.
For those of you who don't bake a lot, if the recipe calls for either bread flour or strong flour is another name for it, this is not the same as all-purpose flour. Strong flour contains more gluten, more protein in it, and it will also make the bread more elastic. So if you are working this by hand, it's going to be a little bit of a workout, but you don't necessarily need to use a mixer.
Wait until it comes together into a reasonably smooth, solid mass, and then you gotta poke it. It should be only slightly sticky. If it's really sticky, add more flour. 5 cups is conservative. You'll know that you've kneaded the dough enough when you can stretch out a little chunk of it so thin that you can see light through it. And this recipe makes 4 pizzas of the maximum size that I can safely bake in my oven, which is 12 to 13 inches in diameter. So,
for me, this dough recipe, and again, if there are any pizza makers watching, then let me know your thoughts. But for me, this is a little on the dry side. Now, if you've made this recipe and it works for you, that's great. But if the recipe is just a little wetter, the dough will be easier to manage. It shouldn't be like Play-Doh, you know, it shouldn't be like a hard cement. I mean, it's not even moving on the cutting board, nothing.
Rip the dough into 4 chunks, and then I roll each of those chunks into a smooth, even ball. Their shape really matters, which is why I rise each ball in its own oiled container. Toss the ball around in the oil and then use it to grease up the sides of the bowl or the Tupperware or whatever it is that you're using that will allow the ball to rise in an even, round shape. Cover them up and put them in the refrigerator. A long, slow rise in the fridge is what gets you the best flavor and texture. 24 hours is the bare minimum.
Now you will see in a lot of places, and also what we saw with Joshua in the prior video, that they will do a first rise for the dough. This will be for like an hour or so. And after the first rise, you then work the dough or turn it into the little dough balls for then a second rise. Now you don't have to put them into individual containers. If you do, that's fine. You can make it how you want it at home. But the container that Joshua was using in the last video is actually the container that I have used in the past, and a lot of other places do use as well. It works fine as long as you give them some extra space and you coat them with a little bit of flour, and that's it. Now this recipe, it may take 24 hours because it's this recipe. It will take the yeast a little bit longer to proof when it's in the fridge because yeast is a living organism. So if you put it into the fridge, it will start to slow down.
Now, when I mix my dough is when I make my sauce. You need a 28-ounce can of whole plum tomatoes. I really prefer San Marzanos. That's the expensive kind from Italy because they are really acidic. They're very bright.
San Marzano tomatoes come from southern Italy, close to Napoli. Now, if you get the authentic tomatoes, it will have the DOP on it, which is the protected destination of origin. Now, what's so special about this area next to Napoli is that Mount Vesuvius is right next to Napoli, and the soil around the area is very rich. makes a massive difference with the ingredients that come from that area. Now, as far as the acidity is concerned, these tomatoes are not supposed to be super acidic. They're supposed to be a little less acidic, a little sweeter, tastier in general.
But no matter what kind you get, they will be packed in some kind of liquid. I think the liquid is usually ground up, lesser quality tomatoes that tend to taste pretty bitter. So I fish the whole tomatoes out into a bowl and I throw away the liquid.
He honestly throws the juice away. Sometimes, or at least where I am, not everything that you import is cheap. But for these to have the definite certified from the area, the DOP on it, it should not be another type of tomato that they mix in with this. Canned products are cooked. If anybody does have experience, do they use a lesser tomato to make the juice?
You could just squish them with your hand, but I like a smooth texture, so I use my stick blender. And I put in a pinch of sugar, a glug of olive oil. That really improves the flavor of the olive oil. And then I put in a lot of dried oregano, which I think is the defining herb of New York-style pizza. Finally, I put 2 or 3 tablespoons of tomato paste in. Without the tomato paste, the sauce is never intense enough. Though if you put in too much, it spoils that fresh, raw tomato taste that you get from, the plum tomatoes. Tomato paste is, of course, just heavily cooked and reduced tomato sauce. So I stir it up and I add more tomato paste until it looks just thick enough to me.
If you're trying to get that super deep red color, then yeah, you can add a little bit of tomato paste to this. It will help the color. The tomatoes, or this canned tomatoes, they're not raw. They've been cooked already. The question is, do you want to further cook this to reduce it, to intensify the flavors? In the last video, we saw Joshua making a completely different sauce. He cooked it further, he added a lot of other ingredients to it. The best thing to do at home is to make it one way, add the ingredients, follow a recipe, and if you like it, that's good. But the next time you make it, if you want to try something different, then change a couple of the ingredients, omit this, add that, write everything down and see what you like. Because the most important thing when making this at home is to make it how you like it, not to make it how it should be, supposedly, the traditional way or this way or that way, unless that's what you're trying to get.
And I put this in the refrigerator with the dough because I think it tastes better after it sits around for a few days. Like I said, you gotta age the dough for 24 hours at least. This has been in for 48 hours, which I really prefer, though sometimes I age it a whole week. It almost tastes like sourdough when you age it that long.
Yeah, if you ferment your pizza dough for a week, for 7 days in the fridge, it will start to take on different flavors. And if it's not sealed tightly, it will start to take on flavors that you have in the fridge. But I'll be honest, 48 hours is a very long time to wait for the pizza dough to rise. We'll have to check out his other video to see if he changed the recipe.
This is my pizza stone. You really need one of these, and you should get the biggest one that'll fit in your oven. In my oven, I get the best results on an upper middle rack position, though that took some experimenting. Every oven is different. If you have a convection setting, use that. It'll help with the browning of the cheese. Preheat to the highest temperature that your oven's got. No matter how fast it comes up to temperature, let it sit and preheat for 1 full hour. Because this is not just about heating the oven, it's about heating the stone. The stone has got to get rocket hot, and it's very dense, so it takes a while. Preheat for a full hour.
This is true. When making a pizza at home, if you use a pizza stone, you're going to get better results. It is something extra that you have to buy if you want to take it a step further. The other thing is, and it's true, you need to know how your oven cooks.
Time to think about cheese, and yes, I use string cheese. It is ridiculous, but where I live, this is the only form in which I can get whole milk, low moisture mozzarella. If it's part skim, it won't taste right. If it's not low moisture, the pizza will be soggy. Now, you can probably buy a block of whole milk, low moisture mozzarella in your city. I have to make do with these stupid sticks, but it's not so bad. 6 of them is the perfect amount, 6 ounces for a 12-inch pizza. That's perfect.
Now, Adam is trying to recreate a New York pizza, so yeah, using low moisture mozzarella is a good idea. If you don't have that, and if you have, well, just fresh mozzarella, is fine, but you need to use less because it will be very watery. Then again, if you have some authentic mozzarella di bufala, buffalo mozzarella, you don't need to put a lot on because it's super flavorful. It's a very good product.
Then I also grate up some Parmesan or Pecorino to put under the mozzarella layer, which I think is traditional in the higher quality New York style places.
If anybody does work in any of the higher end pizzerias, is that true? I mean, you don't have to spill all the kitchen secrets and all the little secrets on making a perfect pizza, because I'm curious to see if it is. So let us know.
When the oven is ready, get your pizza peel. Yeah, you really need one of these too. Then you have to dust it with something so that the pizza won't stick. Semolina or cornmeal would be traditional, I think, but I have found that coarse ground whole wheat flour works best. It does the job without adding any gritty texture. Now get out your dough ball. That smooth top is going to be the bottom of the pizza because it's more likely to slide off of the peel cleanly. This rough underside will be the top because it'll better adhere to the sauce and the cheese. I start by just going around and forming the cornice. That's the fluffy outer ring of crust. Never smash it down, otherwise it'll never fluff up. Then I just stretch out the dough with my hands. You could toss it in the air like a boss, but that takes skill, it's risky, it's messy, and it really only saves you meaningful amounts of time when you're making 100 pizzas a day. For one pizza, hand stretching is fine.
Okay, so yeah, it is very difficult, it can be, to get a perfect circular pizza. I mean, it does take a lot of skill when you see a lot of the pizza guys spinning the pizzas, or even as we saw with the Italian technique or the Napolitan technique of slapping the dough, they use that to get a perfect pizza. If you have to, if you must, you can use a rolling pin. You don't have to be so delicate with it. I mean, you don't have to treat it like it's a newborn baby and you're afraid you're going to drop it. You can be a little more aggressive with the dough.
You'll know that you've got it thin enough when, again, you can see light through it. Once you lay it down on your peel, you have to work fast. Otherwise, the dough will bond to the wood and you'll never be able to slide it off into the oven. Put your sauce on. I like lots of sauce.
Flour or put semolina or something down to prevent it from sticking. It will stick very badly. Now, what I would recommend is instead of using a tablespoon for the sauce, if you have a ladle, use a ladle. And use the back end of the ladle to spread the sauce out. It'll be a lot easier if you have one at home.
Then the Parmesan layer. This really improves the flavor of the pizza, makes it much more rich. Then put on your mozzarella and really take pains to get it on evenly all over, otherwise it won't melt or brown correctly. When you're done, pick up the peel and shake it back and forth to make sure that the pizza is going to release when you take it to the oven. You got to be able to do this with some confidence, like flipping an egg.
This reminds me of the tortilla video that we watched with Adam. You have to be confident, but as we saw in that last video with making the Spanish tortilla, you also have to be confident when flipping it. Now, a lot of people can cheat. They'll stick it in the oven or they'll put a lid on it or whatever so it's not as liquidy. Yeah, that can work, but if you want to get that perfect, if you want to make it more authentic to how we make it here, you flip it. I recommend doing it over the sink so the mess goes into the sink and not on the floor or on you. And I recommend, if you're new at this, to put a cloth or kitchen cloth over your forearm so you don't burn yourself. Because if a little bit does go on you, at least it touches the cloth first and not your arm.
This should only take 5 or 6 minutes to bake. The trick is waiting for the cheese to brown, but not so long that the cheese overheats and starts to separate, and you get a lot of that orange grease layer oozing out. Some separation is inevitable, but you can minimize it by not leaving the pizza in there for too long.
This is one thing with every New York pizza that I've had, they have always been very greasy. Some more than others. Obviously, there should be a limit. It shouldn't be a pool of grease. But it is very interesting, though, to see the evolution of pizza and to see all the different styles, because there are a lot of different styles.
Rather than use the peel, I like to pull the pizza out with a pair of tongs right onto a cooling rack. Resting the pizza on the rack helps keep it crispy, but also when I've tried resting a hot pizza on my plastic cutting boards, the crust tends to take on the flavor of the dishwasher, which is gross. When it's eating temperature, you're safe to transfer to a cutting board.
You never put your plastic cutting board into the dishwasher. Why? Because unless it's super, super, super thick, it will warp, and then it's uneven to cut, uneven to use. Secondly, this is right, you never rest, say a hot pizza or any other meats or any pies or anything like this, you don't let them rest on your plastic cutting board. It will absorb the flavors. Now, for all of you that have a plastic cutting board at home, it is a good idea after every so often that you take your plastic cutting board, you take your silicone spatulas and anything else, and you bleach them. You put them in the sink with hot water, bleach, and you let them sit there for a while. Plastic products will start to absorb the flavor of either cooked products or veggies or other ingredients. And with the cutting boards, you obviously use them a lot. You'll have creases in there, and while that develops bacteria, if you don't scrub them, if you don't sanitize it, it will start to fester, it will start to smell, and it's not nice.
Now, this pizza is only like 12 inches wide, which is way smaller than traditional New York pizza because we just have a normal little home oven, right? But to me, a defining feature of New York pizza is big foldable slices. So I just cut this pizza into quarters.
You can see what I mean by the cutting boards start to warp.
That's a nice big slice. Look how brown the bottom is too, by the way. That's what you get from heating the stone for a long time. So there you go. I really think this gets me very close to my favorite New York style pizzas. If you think you know a better way, seriously, please tell me. I'm sure that I will be working on this for a further 10 years.
Okay, so overall, for me, the final product, it looks good. It does. It really does look good. But for me, the critique would be the dough recipe, to modify it a little bit. It looks too dry, and it shouldn't take 48 hours to proof it. That is like a very long time. Now, Adam does have another pizza video. He has many, but he has a 2.0 video on this recipe. So I wanted to check this one out first to have a bit of a reference, so we have a base to see then in the next video to see what he changed. Let me know your thoughts down below on any critiques that you have or any improvements that you could, see a need for in this recipe. In any case, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed what I added to the video as well. And if you have any questions or comments about any other videos, then let me know if you want me to review any. And be sure to check out this video here, and I will see you guys again very soon. Until next time,